Disclaimer. All characters and events in this story are fictional and created purely for entertainment purposes. The new transfer student had a strange obsession with being one of the boys. From the very first week she arrived, she acted like every prank, every humiliation, and every reckless stunt was just harmless fun. She stuffed a roommate's underwear into another student's backpack after he accidentally dropped it. She locked the vice class monitor inside the restroom simply because the girl had rejected a boy's confession. And on the night before the college entrance exam, the most important exam of our lives, she secretly replaced the light porridge meals I had carefully ordered for the entire class with spicy barbecue and cold beer for her so-called brothers. In my previous life, I discovered her plan in time and stopped everything before it spiraled out of control. The class made it to the exam safely, and everyone completed their tests without incident. But after she failed the exam herself, she cried to the boys and twisted the story completely. If the class monitor hadn't stopped us from going out to relax before the exam, I wouldn't have been so stressed out. I wouldn't have performed this badly. Now I can't even attend college with my brothers anymore. Blinded by sympathy and anger, the boys blamed me for everything. They cornered me on the rooftop staircase of the school and shoved me off the building. The moment I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the exact night everything began. The evening self-study bell had just rung when Su Qianqian jumped excitedly onto a desk. Her ponytail swayed as she grinned proudly at the boys around her. "Hey brothers, don't say I never treat you well," she shouted sweetly. I secretly took the class monitor's phone and swapped out all those bland meat porridge orders for barbecue and cold beer. Tomorrow's the college entrance exam, so tonight we're going all out. Youth is meaningless if you never go crazy at least once. The classroom instantly exploded with cheers. Even when she raised her voice, there was still a spoiled, coquettish softness in it. That was exactly why she had managed to become the boys' favorite person in only one semester. Every single one of them treated her like their bro. But unlike them, I knew very well that relaxing had limits, especially on the night before the most important exam of our lives. The boys slammed their desks, whistled, and applauded excitedly. The girls, meanwhile, exchanged uneasy looks. Their expressions darkened almost immediately. Nobody wanted greasy, spicy barbecue right before the exam. A few girls were just about to object when Su Qianqian sneered and cut them off. "Oh, please, I already know what you girls are going to say. Eating barbecue at night is unhealthy. We'll get pimples. Blah, blah, blah." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "That's why I only ordered 32 portions, just enough for all the boys and me. You girls would only ruin the mood anyway. Better stay in bed and sleep early." She said it so naturally, so confidently, as if excluding the girls was completely justified. Just like before when she humiliated her roommate or trapped another girl in the bathroom, she always claimed she was helping her brothers save face. And because the girls in class were usually quiet and avoided conflict, she assumed nobody would dare challenge her. This time was no different. She even turned toward me deliberately, smiling with open provocation. "What's wrong, class monitor? Aren't you always arguing with me? Why so quiet tonight?" She crossed her arms smugly. "Even if you apologize now, I'm still not taking you with us. You only know how to study. You don't know how to have fun." The boys burst into laughter. In my previous life, her taunts had worked perfectly. I lost my temper, argued with her publicly, and became the villain in everyone's eyes. But this time, I only smiled faintly. "That's unfortunate," I said calmly. "Before placing the original order, I asked for everyone's opinion. You disagreed but never said a word. Instead, you secretly used my phone to change the menu. Fine. That's your choice." I slowly lifted my gaze toward the boys. "And if they want to destroy their own futures, that's their choice too." The room gradually fell silent. "But," I continued coldly, "you are not allowed to use class funds for it. Either I cancel the order right now, or you pay me back every cent yourselves." The atmosphere froze. I leaned lazily against my chair, my tone sharp and clear. You boys can ruin your own futures if you want, but don't expect the girls in this class to pay for it. Chu Ming-yu, my childhood friend, immediately frowned. Lin Wei, isn't it just money? Do you really have to be this calculating? He snapped. Qianqian's right. You girls are way too dramatic. He looked around self-righteously before continuing. We only agreed to eat porridge before because we were accommodating you girls. If you're going to act selfish, then we'll eat what we actually want. And Qianqian excluded you because she was being considerate. You girls can't handle spicy food or alcohol anyway. Then, with a mocking smile, he pulled out his phone and transferred me 500 yuan. Keep the extra as a tip, he said sarcastically. No need to thank me. I laughed softly and raised my payment receipt. Sorry, I replied. That's only enough to cover the decimal. The smile vanished from his face. The total is 6,500 yuan. Please transfer the remaining balance. The classroom instantly fell dead silent. Everyone slowly turned towards Su Qianqian. The class fund only had around 500 yuan left, yet she had somehow ordered over 6,000 yuan worth of food. She claimed it was barbecue, but most of the order consisted of expensive seafood dishes she personally liked, along with premium alcohol. On average, the meal cost over 200 yuan per person. For the first time, panic flashed across Su Qianqian's face. I didn't notice the price, she muttered awkwardly. I just wanted everyone to enjoy something nice. Besides, Lin Wei, you always treat people to milk tea and desserts anyway. You're rich. Just pay for it this time too. I looked at her coldly. Sorry, I'm not interested in being your ATM. The words hit like a slap. Usually I pay because I want to, because I can afford it. But if you don't even have the money yourself, what exactly are you showing off for? I tilted my head slightly. Does guilt-tripping people make you feel good? For a moment, the entire classroom was stunned. Those were probably the harshest words I had ever spoken in my life. And honestly, it felt amazing. The girls nearby stared at me with sparkling eyes, practically trying not to cheer. Su Qianqian's face turned pale with rage. She hurriedly looked toward Chu Ming-yu for help, but even he looked embarrassed now. Although he came from a wealthy family, his parents controlled his spending tightly. His monthly allowance was nowhere near enough to cover the bill. In the end, the boys were forced to pool their money together. After struggling for nearly 20 minutes, they finally gathered the full amount and transferred it back to me. Chu Ming-yu gritted his teeth furiously. Happy now? I smiled brightly. What do you mean happy? This was your debt in the first place. I waved my phone casually. And thanks to my VIP discount account, you actually paid less than the original price. Then I turned toward the girls beside me. If the boys get a celebration tonight, then we should too. I grinned. I just booked 20 VIP Disneyland tickets. After the exams, we're going together. Transportation, hotel, food. I'll cover everything. The girls immediately erupted into screams of excitement. I glanced lazily towards Su Qianqian. But, sorry, Qianqian, you're not invited. The girls burst into laughter. Meanwhile, jealousy flashed uncontrollably through Su Qianqian's eyes. No matter how much she pretended to be one of the guys, deep down, she still cared desperately about being seen as a girl. Otherwise, why shorten her skirt? Why tailor her uniform shirt tighter around her waist? Soon, the final evening self-study bell rang. The entire senior building exploded with cheers. This was our final night as high school students, the end of 12 exhausting years of studying. Our homeroom teacher entered the classroom just then. Usually stern and strict, tonight his expression looked unusually gentle. Tomorrow is the college entrance exam, he reminded us carefully. Everyone needs proper rest tonight. Don't stay up late, and please watch what you eat. Before he could finish, Su Qianqian interrupted impatiently. "Teacher, it's the last night already. Stop lecturing us. We already booked barbecue and beer. We're celebrating properly tonight." The teacher's face immediately darkened. "Nonsense. Tomorrow is the biggest exam of your lives. What if you get food poisoning? What if something happens?" Then his eyes turned toward me. "Lin Wei, you're the class monitor. Why didn't you stop them?" I answered calmly. "I originally ordered porridge and fruit platters, but Qianqian secretly changed the order using my phone. I tried to cancel it, but they insisted on going and already paid me back. They said they didn't need class funds anymore." The moment she heard that, Su Qianqian became even more arrogant. "Exactly! Why should she control us? We've hated how she acts superior just because she's class monitor. We're graduating anyway. What authority does she even have now?" One by one, the boys joined in. "We know our limits. We'll be back by midnight. If we don't celebrate tonight, we'll regret it forever." Eventually, the teacher gave up with a helpless sigh. "Fine, but don't drink too much." The classroom exploded into cheers again. Su Qianqian shot me a triumphant smile. I smiled back even wider. Because unlike them, I already knew exactly how this night would end. After school ended, Su Qianqian marched out of the campus surrounded by boys, like a victorious queen returning from battle. Laughter echoed around her as several boys rushed to carry her bag, open doors for her, and shower her with attention. She deliberately wrapped an arm around Chu Mingyu's shoulder, leaning close enough for everyone to notice. The proud smile on her face practically screamed triumph as she watched him lower his head to listen to her whisper something in his ear. Under the streetlights outside the school gates, the two of them looked almost like the leading characters of some youthful romance drama. Only I knew how ugly the ending would become. From the dormitory window upstairs, I watched them disappear into the night before calmly turning away. I took a hot shower, dried my hair slowly, then climbed into bed without the slightest hesitation. Tsinghua University, the school of my dreams. In my previous life, I had lost everything before I could even touch it. This time, even if the sky collapsed, I would still walk into that university with my head held high. Outside, the dormitory building remained noisy for a long time. Girls whispered excitedly about Disneyland plans, while distant cheers from the boys drifted in from the streets beyond the campus walls. Meanwhile, I closed my eyes peacefully and fell asleep almost immediately. The next morning, sunlight poured through the curtains. I stretched lazily beneath the warm glow, feeling more refreshed than I had in years. The moment my roommate saw me wake up, she nearly jumped onto my bed in excitement. "Class monitor! Something huge happened last night." I slowly sat up, pretending to know nothing. "What happened?" "Our homeroom teacher did a dorm inspection around midnight and realized none of the boys had returned yet," she explained rapidly. "He panicked and called several teachers to help search for them. Apparently, when the teachers finally located the boys at the barbecue restaurant, nearly all of them were completely drunk. Some were slumped across tables unconscious, others were vomiting in the restroom, and several could barely stand upright. The teachers had no choice but to drag them back to the dorms one by one. But Chu Mingyu and Su Qianqian were missing," my roommate continued dramatically. "The teachers got scared something bad happened to them, so they checked the surveillance cameras with the police. Guess what they found?" I raised an eyebrow slowly. "They went into the small forest behind the restaurant," she whispered, eyes wide with disbelief, "and never came back out." The teachers immediately organized a search party. When they finally found the two of them, both were half naked in the bushes. According to rumors, they had originally planned to sleep together, but halfway through, both suddenly suffered severe stomach problems. By the time the teachers arrived, they were in complete chaos and had to be rushed to the hospital by ambulance. The entire dormitory burst into hysterical laughter the moment the story spread. I couldn't help smiling too. The barbecue itself hadn't actually been poisoned. Most of the boys only got drunk because they drank too much. But Chu Mingyu was severely allergic to certain seafood, while Su Qianqian had overeaten spicy food and alcohol to the point of acute gastroenteritis. Their college entrance exams were already ruined before they even began. And worse than that, their reputations were finished too. By the time we arrived at the examination hall that morning, the entire school already knew what had happened. Students whispered constantly as they passed by. "Did you hear about Class 3? Apparently someone got caught naked in the woods. I heard the ambulance came at 3 in the morning." Some people even secretly laughed while walking past Chu Mingyu's empty seat. Meanwhile, I sat quietly at my desk reviewing formulas one last time. The exam papers this year were surprisingly familiar. Almost every question fell within the topics I had mastered thoroughly. My pen moved steadily across the page. Unlike my previous life, where fear, stress, and resentment had completely destroyed my concentration, this time my mind remained calm and clear from beginning to end. After finishing each paper, I carefully checked every answer multiple times before submitting it. Outside the examination hall, the atmosphere between boys and girls had completely reversed. Normally, students would gather excitedly after each subject to compare answers. But this time, the girls spent nearly every break gossiping about the disaster from the night before. Out of the 30 remaining boys who attended the barbecue gathering, 7 overslept entirely and missed the exam. 13 fell asleep during testing. 6 vomited directly onto their exam papers. The rest barely managed to complete the multiple-choice section. Many of them had once been top students with strong chances of entering elite universities. Now, they had destroyed their futures with their own hands. Meanwhile, the girls from our class all performed exceptionally well. For the first time in a long while, genuine smiles appeared on everyone's faces. No matter what our final scores would be, at least we had done everything we could. After the exams ended, we left for Disneyland exactly as promised. I had visited Disneyland many times before, but somehow this trip felt entirely different. Maybe because this time, the people beside me truly mattered. We wore matching outfits, shared snacks while waiting in endless lines, took ridiculous photos together, and stayed up late talking in the hotel about our futures. One girl wanted to become a doctor. Another dreamed of becoming a lawyer. Someone else planned to study abroad and travel the world. Listening to them talk beneath the colorful fireworks exploding across the night sky, I suddenly realized something important. People always claimed girls gathered only to gossip about celebrities, relationships, or drama. But that was never true. Girls could dream just as fiercely as anyone else, perhaps even more fiercely. By the time college entrance exam scores were released, everyone returned to school for the final class meeting. The classroom was packed once again, but this time the atmosphere felt completely different. The boys sat in silence with exhausted, lifeless expressions. Gone was the arrogance and energy they once carried so proudly. Especially Chu Mingyu and Su Qianqian. Missing the exam itself wasn't even their biggest problem anymore. The truly humiliating part was that clips from the forest incident had somehow spread online. The two of them had already become laughingstocks across local social media. The giant screen at the front of the classroom began counting down for score release. Everyone nervously pulled out their phones. Then suddenly, excited screams erupted across the room. "I passed! I got into my first choice university! Oh my God, I scored way higher than expected!" Our homeroom teacher hurried toward me anxiously. "Lin Wei," he asked nervously, "how many points did you get?" I looked down at my phone screen where my score was currently hidden because of provincial ranking protection. Then I smiled softly. Top 50 in the entire province. For a moment, the teacher froze. Then his eyes turned red instantly. "Good, good," he muttered emotionally. "You finally made me proud." Across the classroom, the last trace of hope in Chu Mingyu's face shattered completely. He had secretly wished that I would fail too. That way his parents wouldn't blame him as harshly. But now? Not only had I had succeeded brilliantly. The classroom erupted into chaos. The girls surrounded me immediately, screaming and hugging each other in excitement. Even students from neighboring classes crowded around the doorway, trying to see the provincial top scorer candidate with their own eyes. Meanwhile, the boys sat frozen in silence, especially Chu Mingyu. His face had gone completely pale, his fingers trembling slightly as he stared at me across the room. The gap between us, once so small, had suddenly become impossibly wide. And then Su Qianqian exploded. "Lin Wei!" she screamed sharply, her voice shrill with fury. "You did this on purpose, didn't you?" The room instantly fell silent again. Her eyes were bloodshot with jealousy and resentment. "You knew exactly what would happen if we went out that night," she shouted. "You could have stopped us, but you didn't. You just stood there watching because you wanted us to fail so you could look better by comparison." Her chest rose violently with each breath. "Now you got what you wanted. Are you happy?" I almost laughed out loud. Instead, I slowly put down my phone and looked at her calmly. "Su Qianqian," I said softly, "don't you think that argument is ridiculous?" The corners of my lips curved faintly. "You were the one who stole my phone and changed the order. I even pressured you over the money, remember? You still insisted on borrowing cash from everyone just to go." I tilted my head slightly. "And didn't our homeroom teacher warn all of you repeatedly? Didn't he explain the consequences clearly?" My voice grew colder with every word. "But none of you listened. Now that things went wrong, suddenly it's everyone else's fault?" Several girls immediately spoke up in support. "Exactly. You're adults already. Stop blaming others for your own stupidity. You absolutely had to drink and party the night before the biggest exam of your lives? Who's responsible for that besides yourselves? And honestly," another girl added bluntly, "most of the boys here actually had the grades to enter top universities. If anyone ruined them, it was you." For the first time, panic flickered across Su Qianqian's face. Because deep down, she knew that accusation wasn't entirely wrong. She really had wanted the boys to perform worse, especially Chu Mingyu. With his original grades, he would almost certainly have entered Tsinghua University alongside me, and Su Qianqian couldn't stand that possibility. If the distance between her and the boys became too large, she would lose her place among them forever. But before anyone else could continue, Chu Mingyu suddenly stood up. "Enough!" His voice echoed sharply through the room. He glared furiously at the girls defending me before pulling Su Qianqian protectively behind him. "Qianqian would never do something like that intentionally," he snapped. "She was only trying to help everyone relax before the exam." Then he turned toward me, eyes burning with anger. "And honestly, Lin Wei, this is partly your fault too." The classroom stared at him in disbelief. He continued shamelessly. "You should have gone with us that night. If the girls had been there to keep things under control, we wouldn't have drunk so much." I stared at him for several seconds. Then I laughed. Not softly, not politely. I laughed so hard that even the teacher looked stunned. "You want us to babysit you now?" I asked mockingly. "Are we your mothers? Your servants?" Chu Mingyu's face turned red instantly. I stood up slowly, my voice growing sharper with every word. "When you ordered barbecue, you didn't include the girls. When you drank yourselves unconscious, you didn't think about the girls. But now that your futures are ruined, suddenly it's our responsibility too?" I looked directly into his eyes. "Tell me honestly, Chu Mingyu, are you still drunk?" The classroom burst into laughter. His expression twisted with humiliation. In a fit of rage, he slammed his chair backward and lunged toward me. "Lin Wei!" But before he could get close, our homeroom teacher rushed between us. "That's enough." The teacher's face was filled with exhaustion and disappointment. "Chu Mingyu, one failed exam isn't the end of your life. If necessary, you can repeat the year and try again." His voice softened slightly. You've all been classmates for 3 years. There's no need to destroy your relationships like this. But Chu Mingyu still looked ready to explode. And at that exact moment, the classroom door suddenly opened again. The principal walked in enthusiastically, followed by several reporters carrying cameras. "Teacher Lee!" the principal shouted excitedly. "Lin Wei scored 714 points, highest score in the entire city." The entire classroom gasped. Even I froze briefly. 714 points. City champion. The reporters immediately turned their cameras toward me. "Student Lin Wei, how do you feel right now? What's your study secret? Do you already know which university you'll choose?" Under countless flashing lights, I stood quietly for a moment before smiling calmly. "To be honest," I answered, "even I was surprised by my score." The reporters laughed warmly. I continued naturally. "But I think I've been very lucky throughout my journey. I met responsible teachers, supportive classmates, and especially an incredible homeroom teacher." I glanced toward Teacher Lee beside me. Half the gray hair on his head probably came from worrying about us. The classroom grew quiet. Then my expression turned slightly regretful. "Actually, it's a shame," I added softly. "Some of the boys in our class insisted on partying before the exam despite repeated warnings. Otherwise, many of them could have entered top universities too." Teacher Lee's eyes immediately turned red. Over the past few days, countless people online had blamed him for what happened. They claimed he was irresponsible and incapable as a teacher, but none of them knew the truth. This man had postponed his own wedding multiple times just to stay with us during senior year. He had done everything he possibly could. I would never allow him to become the scapegoat. The reporters quickly began praising him as well. Teacher Lee truly raised an outstanding student. A student's success reflects the teacher behind them. It's rare to see such mutual respect between teacher and student nowadays. Hearing all the praise directed at me, Su Qianqian's jealousy finally snapped completely. "Don't believe her!" Her scream cut through the classroom sharply. Everyone turned toward her again. "She's lying! She's pretending to be innocent!" Her finger pointed directly at me. "The barbecue order was placed from her phone. She's the one who wanted to ruin our exams." Chu Mingyu immediately stepped forward to support her. "That's right," he said quickly. "Lin Wei placed the order herself. The transaction records are still on her phone." Then he looked at me bitterly. "You've always been jealous and vindictive since childhood. You hated seeing me close to Qianqian, so you deliberately sabotaged everyone." One by one, the boys behind him began joining in. Their faces flushed red with anger. "You ruined us. You destroyed 31 families. You should take responsibility." The reporters exchanged shocked looks instantly. Teacher Lee looked completely stunned. Meanwhile, I simply stood there quietly, watching them, watching their distorted faces twist with hatred, watching them desperately search for someone else to blame. And beside them, Su Qianqian's eyes gleamed with smug satisfaction, convinced her plan had succeeded. The girls behind me were already furious, preparing to argue back, but I gently raised a hand to stop them. Then I waited. Waited until the noise reached its peak. Waited until parents began arriving outside the classroom after hearing the commotion. Only then did I slowly take the microphone from one of the reporters and finally speak. "Spreading lies costs nothing," I said calmly into the microphone, my voice echoing through the silent classroom. "But proving the truth can take everything from someone." The room gradually quieted. I slowly lifted my eyes toward Su Qianqian, Chu Mingyu, and the boys standing behind them. "You all insist that I destroyed your college entrance exams," I continued. "We studied together for 3 years. I truly never imagined you would hate me enough to publicly slander me like this." My tone remained gentle, almost disappointingly gentle. But since you've already forced things this far, then I suppose I have no choice. A strange sense of unease suddenly appeared on several faces. To clear my name, I said slowly, I'll show everyone exactly what happened that night. The moment those words fell, Su Qianqian's expression changed instantly. What are you talking about? She shouted nervously. I ignored her completely. Calmly, I took out my phone and connected it to the classroom projector. The large screen flickered once. Then surveillance footage from the barbecue restaurant appeared before everyone's eyes. The classroom exploded into shocked gasps. The footage was extremely clear. Su Qianqian had already removed her skull jacket, revealing a tight spaghetti-strap top underneath. Half her body leaned directly against Chu Mingyu's chest, while the boys around them whistled loudly. Beer bottles covered the tables. Smoke from the barbecue clouded the air. Laughter and vulgar jokes filled the room. Damn, Qianqian, your figure is insane. Tell the truth. You secretly changed the order because you wanted to seduce Brother Chu tonight, right? You even kept forcing us to drink earlier. Were you trying to get everyone drunk on purpose? The boys laughed wildly. Then another voice shouted, Brother Chu, what are you pretending to be shy for? A girl like Qianqian is practically throwing herself at you already. The next second, Su Qianqian suddenly wrapped her arms around Chu Mingyu's neck and kissed him directly on the lips. The entire restaurant erupted into cheers. Several boys even slammed the tables excitedly. After the kiss, Su Qianqian leaned proudly against him and announced loudly, Chu Mingyu, I've officially claimed you now. From this moment on, you belong to me. Then she narrowed her eyes possessively. And you better stay away from that bitch Lin Wei from now on. If I catch you talking to her again, you're dead. The classroom became deathly silent. Even the reporters forgot to speak. Meanwhile, the video continued playing. Perhaps because of the alcohol, or because his pride as a man had been completely provoked, Chu Mingyu suddenly grabbed Su Qianqian by the waist and pulled her directly onto his lap. You're threatening me now? He laughed darkly. Fine. Let's go to the forest later and see who handles who. The boys nearby screamed with excitement. And then came the final blow. Chu Mingyu leaned close to Su Qianqian's ear and sneered. Lin Wei, my parents may like her, but I never cared about some boring study freak like her. The classroom instantly exploded. The girls looked utterly disgusted. Even several parents standing outside the door frowned deeply. The footage continued. Su Qianqian giggled sweetly while rubbing herself against him. Really? Then you're not allowed to lie to me. Without hesitation, Chu Mingyu lifted her directly into his arms and carried her toward the small forest behind the restaurant, while the boys cheered wildly behind them. The video finally ended there. Silence. Absolute silence. Every face in the classroom looked stunned. Because now everyone understood the truth. The boys had known exactly what kind of person Su Qianqian was all along. They simply didn't care. They willingly allowed themselves to be manipulated because they enjoyed the attention she gave them. And Chu Mingyu? He had destroyed his own future with his own hands. The first person to react was Su Qianqian. No! She suddenly screamed hysterically before rushing toward the projector. Crash! The screen shattered violently as she knocked it over. You bitch! She shrieked at me. You violated my privacy. I'll sue you. I'll send you to prison. I looked at her calmly, then smiled. If anyone should file a lawsuit first, I replied lightly, it should be me. I slowly turned toward the reporters. Just now, they publicly accused me of sabotaging their exams. That's defamation. And then I glanced at the broken projector on the floor. And now she's vandalized school property. My gaze returned to the boys. I'll give all of you one chance, I said quietly. Apologize publicly right now. Otherwise, I smiled faintly. I'll officially press charges." The boys' faces immediately turned white. At their age, they still cared desperately about pride and reputation. But their parents? Their parents cared about reality, and reality hit them like a truck the moment they finished watching that footage. One furious father suddenly rushed forward and slapped his son across the face. "Smack! You idiot!" Another parent grabbed his son by the collar and started kicking him repeatedly. "You skipped the biggest exam of your life for this? You drank yourself unconscious over a girl like her?" The classroom descended into complete chaos. Several mothers burst into tears on the spot. Others turned directly toward Su Qianqian with expressions full of hatred. "You ruined my child. You little disaster. You destroyed their futures." Su Qianqian screamed as parents shoved and struck her from all sides. Chu Mingyu desperately tried protecting her, only to get punched several times himself. At that moment, nobody cared that he came from a wealthy family anymore. In everyone's eyes, the two of them were the reason their children's futures had collapsed. The live stream audience online exploded as well. Within minutes, the number of viewers surpassed 10 million. Comments flooded the screen endlessly. "This is insane. They ruined their own lives and still blamed the class monitor? That girl is terrifying." The class monitor handled this perfectly. Eventually, the platform shut down the live stream entirely because the situation had become too violent. Not long after, police officers and ambulances finally arrived at the school. Fortunately, none of the parents faced serious consequences. Most were only criticized and required to pay minor medical compensation. But Su Qianqian and Chu Mingyu were both sent directly back to the hospital. This time, however, their treatment could not have been more different. Su Qianqian lay alone in an ordinary hospital room, while her parents cursed her non-stop for bringing shame upon the family. They refused to let her continue school and planned to force her into work immediately after discharge. Meanwhile, Chu Mingyu stayed in a private VIP ward, with specialists personally overseeing his recovery. 3 days later, once his injuries stabilized, his family immediately sent him overseas. I heard he resisted violently. He even went on a hunger strike because he refused to leave Su Qianqian behind. But no matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't fight against his family's decisions. As for the other boys, half repeated their final year of high school. The other half entered society early and began working exhausting, low-paying jobs. Originally, many of them could have entered elite universities and built bright futures for themselves, but they destroyed everything with their own choices. And honestly, if this were the end of their suffering, it would almost feel unfair to me. I didn't need revenge through blood. No. What I wanted was for them to spend the rest of their lives understanding exactly what it felt like to lose destiny with their own hands. Meanwhile, my own life finally began moving toward the future I had once lost. Tsinghua University, the dream I had protected with both hands across 2 lifetimes. This time, I walked through its gates, openly, proudly, and with a full scholarship attached to my name. The moment I stepped onto campus for the first time, a cool autumn breeze swept across the boulevard lined with golden ginkgo trees. Students hurried past carrying books and laptops, laughter drifting through the air beneath the towering academic buildings. Everything looked exactly like the future I had once imagined. Only this time, I truly belonged there. Because of the massive attention surrounding my college entrance exam story, my family's company unexpectedly benefited as well. The online discussions brought enormous publicity, and the company's stock price rose continuously for weeks. As for me, I took advantage of the sudden internet fame much earlier than most people my age understood how to. While others were still adapting to university life, I was already learning how to build personal branding, create business opportunities, and turn attention into influence. By sophomore year, I had already founded my own startup brand. That same year, I also became an exchange student overseas for 1 semester. And there, unexpectedly, I met Chu Mingyu again. 2 years had passed since we last saw each other. He sat alone among the audience during one of my academic presentations abroad. Beneath the bright lights of the lecture hall, I stood confidently on stage in formal attire, speaking fluent English, while professors and students listened attentively. Meanwhile, he remained hidden in the shadows below. At first, I almost didn't recognize him. The arrogant, spirited boy who once stood proudly beside me during school ceremonies was gone. His shoulders looked tense and exhausted now. The confidence in his eyes had completely disappeared. After my speech ended, applause filled the hall. But before I could even step down from the stage, Chu Mingyu quietly lowered his head and left through the back exit without saying a single word. Watching his retreating figure disappear into the crowd, I suddenly remembered something. Back when we were 16 years old, we once stood side by side on the school rooftop after evening study sessions ended. At the time, he had smiled brightly and said, "One day, we'll get into Tsinghua together. We'll stand at the top of the world together too." Back then, he truly believed it, and honestly, so had I. But now, the distance between us had become wider than an ocean. I continued moving upward while he slowly faded into the ordinary crowd below. From then on, we occasionally crossed paths overseas, sometimes in academic buildings, sometimes at business events, sometimes simply passing each other on crowded streets. But neither of us ever stopped walking. Neither of us spoke. We had already become strangers living in completely different worlds. 2 more years passed in the blink of an eye. I graduated from Tsinghua University with honors. The startup brand I founded during college successfully entered the stock market shortly afterward, and I officially became one of the youngest rising entrepreneurs in the industry. That year, my former high school invited me back to give a speech to the new graduating students. At the same time, I decided to organize a class reunion as a surprise gift for our homeroom teacher. I covered all expenses personally. To my surprise, nearly every girl from our old class attended. Some even flew back from overseas just for the gathering. More than half of the boys came too. Time had changed everyone. Back in high school, the boys had once been loud, proud, and arrogant. But adulthood had crushed much of that confidence away. Reality was cruel. Jobs, rent, competition, social pressure. Life no longer cared about youthful pride. Meanwhile, the girls from our class were all doing remarkably well. Some had become lawyers. Some entered medicine. Others worked in finance, technology, or education. Every single one of them carried themselves with calm confidence now. Standing on the auditorium stage once again, I looked down at the younger students staring at me with admiration shining in their eyes. Then I smiled. 7 years ago, I began slowly, I sat exactly where you are sitting today. The auditorium became completely silent. At the time, all I had was pressure, fear, and uncertainty about the future. I paused briefly. But 7 years later, I can finally say this proudly. I lifted my head slightly, and today, a faint smile appeared on my lips. First High School is proud to have me. Thunderous applause exploded throughout the hall. Many students looked inspired. Others looked emotional. I continued calmly. I hope 7 years from now, you'll also stand somewhere high enough to make your younger self proud. Because only then will all those sleepless nights, all those years of studying, and all the sacrifices you made truly become meaningful. The applause lasted nearly 5 full minutes. Near the back rows, several of my old female classmates had tears in their eyes. Back then, we once promised each other that we would meet again at the peak of success. And now, at least one of us had truly made it there. That night, the reunion dinner became incredibly lively. Teacher Lee sat happily at the center of the table, looking much healthier and slightly chubbier than before. We laughed together, shared stories about our careers, exchanged business connections, and reminisced about the chaos of high school life. And unlike that disastrous barbecue years ago, nobody drank alcohol tonight. The tables were filled only with juice, tea, desserts, and warm dishes. At some point during dinner, someone suddenly mentioned shocking news about Chu Mingyu and Su Qianqian. Apparently, after returning from overseas 1 year earlier, Chu Mingyu had secretly reunited with her again. By then, Su Qianqian had already been divorced twice. Even so, she still clung tightly to him. To marry into the wealthy Chu family, she intentionally got pregnant before marriage. Unfortunately for her, the Chu family had rejected her even back when she was young and unmarried. Now? There was absolutely no chance they would accept her. Rumor said the family planned to keep the child but throw her out afterward. But fate seemed determined to humiliate them even further. Because after the baby was born, everyone discovered the child was black. At first, they thought the hospital had mixed up the babies. But DNA tests confirmed the child was biologically Su Qianqian's. During the time Chu Mingyu worked desperately to rebuild his career and earn money for her, Su Qianqian had apparently been cheating on him with a black international student near the university district. Not only that, the rumors surrounding her private life became increasingly scandalous. When Chu Mingyu learned the truth, he almost abandoned the child on the spot and completely cut ties with her. But Su Qianqian refused to let go. She cried, begged, and even contacted our old homeroom teacher, hoping he would persuade Chu Mingyu to forgive her. Hearing the entire story, everyone at the table fell silent. Some looked shocked, others simply sighed. As for me, I only lowered my eyes quietly and stirred the juice in my glass. Because none of it surprised me anymore. People like Su Qianqian never truly changed. And people like Chu Mingyu always paid the price for confusing desire with love. The reunion didn't end with the gossip. After a brief silence, the topic slowly shifted to something far more bitter: everyone's real lives after graduation. It turned out that reality had not been kind to most of the boys. Many of them were working exhausting jobs, clocking in from early morning to late night, repeating the same cycle every day just to survive. Some earned barely 5,000 yuan a month, which was already considered decent among them. Others had failed at starting businesses. Some were unemployed altogether, drifting between short-term jobs with no stability in sight. What they once called freedom, after skipping the exam, had quietly turned into a life with no direction. They began speaking more cautiously now, less arrogance, more hesitation. And then came the shift in tone. A few of them started asking, almost pleading, for help. "Lin Wei, do you have any connections? Can you help us get into a better company? I heard your startup is doing really well. Maybe you could recommend us?" Their voices were no longer loud or confident. They were careful, small, almost embarrassed. Some of the girls softened for a moment, their expressions flickering with hesitation. But no one answered immediately. Instead, all eyes slowly turned toward me. Not because I was the most talkative person, but because at some point I had become the person they all instinctively looked to when decisions mattered. Even my parents had once joked about it. "Your friendships are strange," they said. "Everyone seems to rely on you." But I understood the truth better than anyone. It wasn't luck. It was effort. It was consistency. It was the fact that, in every stage of life, I had kept moving forward while others were still deciding whether to try. The room grew quiet, waiting. Finally, I spoke. "I won't help you find jobs." The boys stiffened immediately. Before panic could spread, I continued calmly. "But not because I want to punish you." I placed my glass down gently. "Because I don't think you need someone to rescue you." My eyes moved across the table. "If I give you a job today, what happens tomorrow when things get difficult? When you make mistakes? When you don't like your boss? You'll come back again and ask someone else to fix it for you. No one spoke. Even the ones who wanted to argue couldn't find the words. I leaned back slightly. "You're not children anymore." My voice remained steady. "You made choices back then, and those choices shaped where you are now." A faint silence settled over the table. Heavy, uncomfortable, but honest. Then I softened my tone slightly. "If you really want to change your life, don't start by asking for opportunities. Start by becoming someone who doesn't need to ask." The words landed like a final verdict. No one interrupted after that. Eventually, the reunion ended. People left in small groups, some laughing quietly, others lost in thought, a few avoiding eye contact altogether. Outside the restaurant, the night air was cool. I stood under the streetlights for a moment, watching them scatter in different directions, just like the paths our lives had taken years ago. Some of them would rebuild, some of them wouldn't, and that was no longer something I could control. A week later, I was invited back to my old high school for a formal keynote speech. The auditorium was packed. Rows of new students sat exactly where we once had, their faces filled with the same mixture of ambition and anxiety. On the stage, Teacher Lee sat in the front row. He looked older now, softer around the edges, but his eyes were still warm. When I stepped onto the stage, the applause came instantly. I adjusted the microphone, looked out over the sea of faces, and smiled slightly. "Hello," I began. "I'm Lin Wei. I graduated from this school 7 years ago." A murmur passed through the crowd. I paused for a moment, then continued. "Back then, I thought success was about competing with others. But later, I realized something else." My voice grew steady. "It's not about defeating anyone. It's about not becoming the person you used to be." Silence. Complete silence. Even the students who were fidgeting before now sat still. I looked toward Teacher Lee. "Many people once thought my teacher was responsible for what happened in our class. But I want to say this clearly." My tone softened. "He protected us more than anyone knew. He didn't fail us. He tried to save us." A faint tremor passed through the audience. Teacher Lee lowered his head slightly, his eyes red. I continued. "If there's anything I hope you remember from my story, it's this." I looked forward again. "Your future is not decided by one night, but it is shaped by every night you choose to ignore responsibility." A long pause. Then I smiled again, brighter this time. "So don't waste your time blaming others. Because when you finally stand at the top of the mountain, you'll realize no one was ever holding you back in the first place." The hall erupted into applause. Long, loud, unending. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt something quietly settle inside me. Not revenge, not satisfaction, just closure. The applause in the auditorium slowly faded, but the atmosphere lingered, heavy with reflection, like everyone was still processing something they couldn't quite put into words. After the speech, students began lining up for photos. Some asked for signatures. Others simply stood nearby, hesitating as if unsure whether to approach. Teacher Lee stayed seated at the front row for a long time. When the crowd finally thinned out, he walked up to the stage alone. His footsteps were slower than I remembered. "You've really grown up," he said quietly. I smiled. "You taught me well." He shook his head lightly, almost as if rejecting the compliment. "I didn't teach you all that," he said. "You chose your own path." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside the auditorium windows, the late afternoon sun was dipping low, painting the schoolyard in a soft golden glow. Students were still moving around below, some laughing, some rushing home, some lingering as if trying to stretch their last moments of youth. Teacher Lee suddenly let out a soft sigh. "You know," he said, "after everything that happened back then, I used to think I failed you all." His voice was calm, but tired. I kept asking myself if I did something wrong, if I could have stopped it. I looked at him quietly. He continued, "But now, seeing you standing here like this, I think maybe I was wrong to blame myself." I shook my head slightly. "Not maybe," I said gently. "You were wrong." He gave a faint, bitter smile. "You're still as straightforward as ever." I laughed softly. Some things don't need to be complicated. A comfortable silence settled between us. Then he glanced at me. "Do you ever think about them?" he asked. I understood exactly who he meant. For a brief moment, I looked toward the empty seats in the auditorium, where echoes of the past seemed to still sit quietly in the air. "I think about them," I admitted, "but not in the way you might think." I paused. "I don't hate them anymore." Teacher Lee raised his eyebrows slightly, as if surprised. I continued, "Hate takes effort, and they don't deserve that much of my energy anymore." A faint breeze passed through the open windows. I lowered my gaze. What they became is just the result of their own choices. Another silence. This one felt lighter, not empty, just finished. Teacher Lee nodded slowly, as if accepting something he had carried for too long. "I'm glad you're not stuck in it anymore," he said softly. I smiled. I never was. As we walked out of the auditorium together, the school corridor felt strangely familiar. The same walls, the same bulletin boards, the same echo of footsteps that once carried teenage dreams and fears. But everything also felt distant, like a story I had already finished reading. At the school gate, Teacher Lee stopped. "You should go," he said. "Your life is waiting for you." I looked at him one last time. "And yours too, teacher." He chuckled lightly. "Mine is mostly paperwork now." I smiled, then turned away. The evening air outside was cool and clean. As I stepped beyond the school gates, I didn't look back, because I no longer needed to. The past had already played its final scene, and the future, quiet, vast, and entirely mine, was already unfolding ahead. Years passed quietly after that. The kind of quiet that only comes after storms have finally exhausted themselves. My company continued growing steadily. What began as a small startup during university eventually expanded into a full international brand. Interviews, conferences, investment meetings, overseas partnerships. My schedule became increasingly packed until sometimes even I forgot how young I still was. People often described me the same way in magazines and business reports. Cold, rational, untouchable. But only I knew the truth. I wasn't born strong. I simply learned very early that if I wanted to survive, nobody else would carry me forward. One winter evening, after finishing a business conference overseas, I returned alone to my hotel room overlooking the city skyline. Snow drifted silently outside the windows. The room was dim, except for the soft glow of the city lights reflecting across the glass. I loosened the collar of my shirt, exhausted, and absent-mindedly opened my phone. A message notification appeared. It was from one of my old classmates. At first, I almost ignored it, but then I noticed the content. "Did you hear? Chu Mingyu is dead." My fingers paused. For several seconds, I simply stared at the screen without moving. Then I opened the message fully. The details were short, cold, brutal. Half a year after the reunion, Chu Mingyu had finally started dating someone new. According to rumors, he genuinely wanted to move on this time. He was trying to rebuild his life, little by little. But Su Qianqian found out, and she completely lost control. During one of their arguments, she drove her car directly into him. Witnesses said she looked almost insane afterward, screaming and crying while covered in blood. Chu Mingyu died before the ambulance arrived. Su Qianqian was sentenced to life imprisonment. No reductions, No possibility of early release. The message ended there. I slowly lowered my phone. Outside the window, snow continued falling silently over the city. For a long time, I said nothing. Did I feel happy? No. Did I feel sad? Not really. What I felt most was distance, as though those people no longer truly belonged to the same world as me anymore. Back in high school, everything had felt enormous. Love, jealousy, humiliation, revenge. At 17 years old, emotions seemed powerful enough to destroy entire lives. And maybe they really were. But now, standing here years later, I finally understood something. Most tragedies are not created in one moment. They are built slowly, choice after choice, mistake after mistake, until eventually, destruction becomes unavoidable. Su Qianqian had spent her entire life craving attention, validation, and shortcuts. Chu Mingyu had spent his entire life mistaking desire for loyalty. And the boys who followed them? They had simply chosen pleasure over discipline one too many times. None of it happened overnight. I walked toward the window slowly. Below, the city lights stretched endlessly into the distance like rivers of gold. Somewhere out there, millions of people were still struggling, dreaming, failing, surviving. Life never stopped moving, and neither would I. A few months later, another piece of news spread among our old classmates. Several of the boys from our class had fallen into serious debt. Some were being chased by loan sharks, others had criminal records. A few had already been in and out of prison multiple times. Online, people even began mocking our old graduating class as the most disastrous male class in first high school history. Cruel? Maybe. But reality was always crueler than rumors. One evening, after another long business dinner, I stood alone in front of the mirror inside my apartment. The city lights shimmered behind me. I slowly lowered my gaze toward my own hands. Clean, elegant, untouched by dirt or blood. A pair of hands that had built everything through effort alone. For a moment, I remembered the girl I used to be. The girl who once fell from a rooftop because she tried to save people who didn't want saving. The girl who once cried in silence after being blamed for everyone else's failures. The girl who once thought kindness alone could protect relationships. I smiled faintly at the memory. Then I spoke softly to my reflection. You finally made it. For a long time after that, life became almost beautifully ordinary. Not easy, not peaceful every single day, but stable. And after everything I had lived through, stability itself felt like a luxury. I buried myself in work during the following years. My company expanded overseas, our products entered international markets, and invitations to speak at global conferences became more frequent. People started calling me the youngest female entrepreneur of the decade. Every headline praised my intelligence, composure, and leadership. Nobody knew how much of that composure had been forged from pain. Sometimes, during interviews, reporters would ask the same question over and over again. What is the secret behind your success? At first, I used to give polished answers. Discipline, perseverance, vision. But eventually, I stopped pretending. One day, during a live interview, I answered honestly instead. The real reason? I said calmly. I learned very early that nobody is responsible for saving you. The host looked slightly surprised, so I continued. When you stop waiting for other people to fix your life, you become terrifyingly strong. That clip spread everywhere online afterward. Millions of people shared it. Some praised it, others called it cold. But I didn't care anymore, because it was true. One spring afternoon, several years later, I returned to my hometown alone. The city had changed a lot. New shopping centers, new subway lines, new apartment buildings stretching toward the sky. but some places remained exactly the same, including First High School. The security guard at the gate recognized me almost immediately and hurriedly welcomed me inside with excitement. Apparently, my graduation photo had been hanging permanently in the school's Hall of Excellence for years now. As I walked through the campus, countless memories surfaced quietly around me. The old classroom building, the basketball courts, the rooftop staircase, the place where my first life ended. I stopped there for a moment. The afternoon wind brushed softly against my hair. Strangely enough, I no longer felt anger standing there. No hatred, no fear, only distance, as though that tragedy had happened to someone else entirely. I stood there silently for a while before finally turning away. Some wounds never disappear completely, but eventually they stop hurting. Before leaving the school, I visited Teacher Lee once more. He had officially retired by then. His office looked smaller than I remembered, cluttered with books, teacups, and stacks of old student records. When he saw me enter, he laughed warmly. "I had a feeling you'd come back someday." I sat across from him and smiled. "You know me too well." He poured tea for me slowly. "You've become someone incredible," he said sincerely. I lowered my eyes slightly. "So have you." Teacher Lee chuckled. "I'm just an old man now." "No," I said quietly. "You were the reason many of us survived those years." For a brief second, his expression softened deeply. Then he sighed. "You know, after retirement, I finally had time to think about everything properly." His gaze drifted toward the window. "I realized something interesting." "What is it?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "The students who succeeded later in life weren't always the smartest ones." I listened quietly. They were the ones who could endure loneliness. His words settled gently into the room. "People think success comes from talent," he continued, "but most of the time, it comes from surviving all the moments when nobody claps for you." I stared down at the tea in my hands. For some reason, that sentence hit harder than anything else I had heard in years. Because he was right. The hardest moments in life were never the dramatic ones. Not betrayal, not humiliation, not even revenge. The hardest moments were the quiet ones. Studying alone while everyone else was having fun, working late while others rested, moving forward without praise, comfort, or guarantees. Enduring silently while nobody understood your choices. Teacher Lee looked at me carefully. "You handled your pain well," he said softly. I smiled faintly. "No," I corrected him. "I just refused to let it handle me." For a moment he looked almost emotional. Then he laughed and shook his head. "You really were born stubborn." I laughed too. Outside the office windows, students were finishing afternoon classes. Their laughter echoed through the hallways just like ours once did. Young, carefree, full of possibilities. As I prepared to leave, Teacher Lee suddenly called out to me again. "Lin Wei!" I turned back. He looked at me quietly for several seconds before speaking. "Do you regret anything?" The question lingered in the air between us. I thought carefully about it. About my first life, my second chance, about Chu Ming Yu, about Su Qianqian, about everything I had gained and everything I had lost. Finally, I smiled softly. "Yes," I admitted. Teacher Lee waited patiently. "I regret that I spent so much time trying to save people who never wanted to save themselves." The old teacher nodded slowly. Then he smiled too. "That's how young people learn." I looked at him one last time before leaving the office. As I stepped outside, the setting sun painted the campus gold. And for the first time in both my lives, I truly understood something. Success was never revenge. Success was freedom. Outside, dawn was beginning to rise, and somewhere far behind me, the ghosts of my old life finally disappeared completely. For a long time after that, life became almost beautifully ordinary. Not easy, not peaceful every single day, but stable. And after everything I had lived through, stability itself felt like a luxury. I buried myself in work during the following years. My company expanded overseas, our products entered international markets, and invitations to speak at global conferences became more frequent. People started calling me the youngest female entrepreneur of the decade. Every headline praised my intelligence, composure, and leadership. Nobody knew how much of that composure had been forged from pain. Sometimes, during interviews, reporters would ask the same question over and over again. What is the secret behind your success? At first, I used to give polished answers. Discipline, perseverance, vision. But eventually I stopped pretending. One day, during a live interview, I answered honestly instead. The real reason? I said calmly. I learned very early that nobody is responsible for saving you. The host looked slightly surprised. So I continued. When you stop waiting for other people to fix your life, you become terrifyingly strong. That clip spread everywhere online afterward. Millions of people shared it. Some praised it. Others called it cold. But I didn't care anymore, because it was true. One spring afternoon, several years later, I returned to my hometown alone. The city had changed a lot. New shopping centers, new subway lines, new apartment buildings stretching toward the sky. But some places remained exactly the same, including First High School. The security guard at the gate recognized me almost immediately and hurriedly welcomed me inside with excitement. Apparently, my graduation photo had been hanging permanently in the school's Hall of Excellence for years now. As I walked through the campus, countless memories surfaced quietly around me. The old classroom building, the basketball courts, the rooftop staircase, the place where my first life ended. I stopped there for a moment. The afternoon wind brushed softly against my hair. Strangely enough, I no longer felt anger standing there. No hatred, no fear. Only distance, as though that tragedy had happened to someone else entirely. I stood there silently for a while before finally turning away. Some wounds never disappear completely, but eventually, they stop hurting. Before leaving the school, I visited Teacher Lee once more. He had officially retired by then. His office looked smaller than I remembered, cluttered with books, teacups, and stacks of old student records. When he saw me enter, he laughed warmly. I had a feeling you'd come back someday. I sat across from him and smiled. You know me too well. He poured tea for me slowly. You've become someone incredible, he said sincerely. I lowered my eyes slightly. So have you. Teacher Lee chuckled. I'm just an old man now. No, I said quietly. You were the reason many of us survived those years. For a brief second, his expression softened deeply. Then he sighed. You know, after retirement, I finally had time to think about everything properly. His gaze drifted toward the window. I realized something interesting. What is it? I asked. He smiled faintly. The students who succeeded later in life weren't always the smartest ones. I listened quietly. They were the ones who could endure loneliness. His words settled gently into the room. People think success comes from talent, he continued. But most of the time, it comes from surviving all the moments when nobody claps for you. I stared down at the tea in my hands. For some reason, that sentence hit harder than anything else I had heard in years. Because he was right. The hardest moments in life were never the dramatic ones. Not betrayal, not humiliation, not even revenge. The hardest moments were the quiet ones. Studying alone while everyone else was having fun, working late while others rested, moving forward without praise, comfort, or guarantees, enduring silently while nobody understood your choices. Teacher Lee looked at me carefully. "You handled your pain well," he said softly. I smiled faintly. "No," I corrected him. "I just refused to let it handle me." For a moment, he looked almost emotional. Then he laughed and shook his head. "You really were born stubborn." I laughed, too. Outside the office windows, students were finishing afternoon classes. Their laughter echoed through the hallways just like ours once did. Young, carefree, full of possibilities. As I prepared to leave, Teacher Lee suddenly called out to me again. "Lin Wei!" I turned back. He looked at me quietly for several seconds before speaking. "Do you regret anything?" The question lingered in the air between us. I thought carefully about it. About my first life, my second chance, about Chu Mingyu, about Su Qian, about everything I had gained and everything I had lost. Finally, I smiled softly. "Yes," I admitted. Teacher Lee waited patiently. "I regret that I spent so much time trying to save people who never wanted to save themselves." The old teacher nodded slowly. Then he smiled too. "That's how young people learn." I looked at him one last time before leaving the office. As I stepped outside, the setting sun painted the campus gold. And for the first time in both my lives, I truly understood something. Success was never revenge. Success was freedom. That night, after leaving the school, I didn't return to the city immediately. Instead, I drove alone toward the coastline just outside town. The sea at dusk was calm and endless, the waves rolling quietly beneath the fading orange sky. I parked near the shore and stepped outside, letting the cold breeze brush against my face. For years, I had been moving non-stop, studying, building, winning, surviving. I had become so accustomed to running forward that I almost forgot what it felt like to simply stand still. The sound of the ocean filled the silence around me, steady, unhurried, indifferent to human joy or sorrow. I sat down on a stone near the water and closed my eyes briefly. For some reason, memories began surfacing one after another. Not the painful ones this time, but the small things. The girls in my dorm laughing late at night while sharing snacks. Teacher Lee secretly leaving extra study materials on my desk. The excitement of receiving my university acceptance letter. The first salary I ever earned. The moment my company officially went public. The way my parents cried quietly during my graduation ceremony because they were proud of me. Those moments felt warm, real, alive. And suddenly, I realized something important. For so many years, I had focused on escaping my past that I rarely allowed myself to fully appreciate the life I had built afterward. I opened my eyes slowly. The sky had darkened completely now, countless stars scattered above the ocean like fragments of shattered glass. My phone vibrated softly beside me. A message from one of my old female classmates appeared in the group chat. "Next month's reunion trip. Don't even think about skipping again, President Lin." A second message immediately followed. "And bring expensive gifts." Then another. "And pay for dinner." I laughed quietly to myself. Some things never changed. The girls from our class were all living different lives now. One had become a lawyer. Another was a surgeon. One ran her own company overseas. Another had become a university professor. Some were married. Some were single. Some had children already. Some still chased dreams across the world alone. But no matter how far life carried us, whenever we gathered together again, it somehow still felt like we were 17, as though time only existed outside those moments. I replied casually in the chat, "Fine, I'll pay." The group instantly exploded with messages. "Rich woman spotted. As expected of our boss. Long live Sister Wei." I smiled helplessly while reading them. Then, after a moment, another classmate suddenly sent a message privately. Do you know? Back then, all the girls secretly admired you. I blinked slightly. Why? Her reply came quickly. Because you were the first person who ever taught us that being a girl wasn't something shameful. My fingers froze above the screen. The waves continued crashing softly against the shore. The message continued. Back then, everyone always told us girls should tolerate more, sacrifice more, stay quiet more. But you never accepted that. You made us realize we were allowed to protect ourselves too. I stared silently at those words for a very long time. Then slowly, I locked my phone screen. The ocean breeze felt colder now, but strangely, my chest felt warm. Maybe that was the true meaning behind everything that happened. Not revenge, not victory, not even success, but proof. Proof that kindness should never require self-destruction. Proof that girls did not need to shrink themselves to deserve respect. Discipline feels lonely. Growth feels unfair. And protecting yourself often makes people call you cold. I smiled faintly. But the people who survive in the end are usually the ones who learn how to keep moving even when nobody understands them. For a brief second, memories flashed through my mind again. The rooftop, the betrayal, the humiliation, the second chance, and the girl who once stood alone against an entire classroom. I looked out across the audience. You don't need everyone to like you, I said clearly. You only need to make sure you never betray yourself. The applause this time was thunderous, louder than before. But unlike years ago, I no longer depended on applause to feel valuable. After the event ended, countless students surrounded me asking questions, requesting photos, seeking advice about life and the future. One girl, probably no older than 16, hesitated nervously before speaking. Ms. Lin, she asked softly, were you ever scared? I looked at her for a moment. Then I smiled honestly. All the time. She seemed surprised. But courage, I continued gently, isn't about not being afraid. It's about refusing to let fear decide your life. The girl's eyes slowly turned red. She bowed deeply toward me before leaving. As I watched her disappear into the crowd, I suddenly saw a reflection of my younger self inside her. Lost, determined, trying desperately to become stronger. That night, after returning to the hotel, I stood alone by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights of Beijing. The world outside glittered endlessly. Cars moved like rivers of light below. Somewhere out there, millions of people were still fighting their own silent battles, just like I once did. My assistant handed me tomorrow's schedule, another interview, another business meeting, another flight overseas, a life constantly moving forward. After she left, I remained standing by the window quietly. Then, almost unconsciously, I whispered softly into the reflection staring back at me. You survived. The woman in the glass smiled calmly back, not with pride, not with arrogance, but with peace. And for the first time in both my lives, peace felt even more valuable than success.